BXB. It's in the game!
Hey guys, it's me Ben, back with another one of my quick video reviews, and this time I'm looking at a very interesting new title from Daedalic Entertainment. So this is the European-based project, State of Mind. Now, as we reach the end of the 2010s, as we approach the year 2020, which to me sounds like we are already living in a science fiction society. I can't quite believe that's where things are when you're talking to a guy as me, born in the 1980s. We couldn't really get much more further from that point. But as we reach this point in time, the discussion of transhumanism is becoming a more and more relevant topic. Now, transhumanism is the idea that humanity can evolve beyond the physical restrictions of the flesh and bone body we have. Now, that might mean we end up taking on cybernetics and augmentations like you see in various science fiction ideas and games such as the Deus Ex series. That might mean that our human consciousness are uploaded entirely into robotics or synthetics, something more akin to a Blade Runner future. Or it might mean that we forego any form of physical restriction and live as purely data on the net or in a virtual world. And what we have with State of Mind at its core is a discussion, a thesis, an idea around those concepts. And those concepts are hung on a central character, Richard, who is a journalist in this 2048 cyberpunk Berlin, in which robots are becoming commonplace, in which virtual reality is commonplace, almost like a realistic extrapolation of where we are right now. I actually really enjoyed State of Mind's grounding and State of Mind's setting in what felt like a very real sort of recent, or soon to be with us future. And beyond the machinations of our main character Richard, we have his desire to delve into a mystery, around the events of one evening in which he suffered a horrible accident, and how that has done to his brain, and what that has done to those around him. His wife, his son are missing. What's happened? So it's a very human story that brings us into these larger concepts and into these larger themes and ideas that we have in State of Mind. One of the things you'll notice immediately from watching the video, it's a very striking visual style. Obviously, it's not a massive team, and instead of trying to say do photorealism in a Detroit Become Human style, which we've just had recently released, you know, that's not necessarily something that's available to these smaller studios. So they've focused on a very specific artistic style with this low polygon character model set in realistic environments. I really like the style of the game. I actually really like how the environments look. I really like how the characters look. And then we have a fully voiced game, which is very narrative focused. There are some gameplay elements in here. They sometimes feel a little tacked on, actually. But mostly, you're walking around, you're interacting with the environment, and you're interacting with other characters to go through dialogue trees. The game isn't trying to be challenging. It's trying to give you an interactive wrapper for what is obviously a very human story set in these very big themes. And I'm obviously being quite careful here to talk around the subject and not talk in specifics, because the story is a thriller, and the fun to be had here is definitely experiencing it as it goes along without too many spoilers. I will say that Richard goes through some various trials and tribulations that force him to confront a virtual world and a counterpart in that world by the name of Adam. And in this virtual world, it's interesting because it's posed as a utopia compared to Berlin's dystopic society. Things aren't going great in the real world, and it's one of the reasons that a large sort of multinational conglomerate led by this gentleman Kurt is looking to colonize Mars, to get people off the planet. Politics aren't great. There's a lot of corporate espionage, lots of violence in the streets. Things are definitely not going well in 2048. So there's a desire to escape this to a new reality, to a virtual world, or an entirely different world in the form of Mars itself. I definitely enjoyed the themes, and I enjoyed the story that was portrayed in State of Mind. The biggest issue I had was that it's fairly clear that this has been originally written in a non-English language. It's actually German in this case, and you can play the whole game using the German audio and then just have subtitles. And I did try that out, and to a degree I found the acting on display in the German a little bit better. But it's hard to say because I don't speak German. I found sometimes that the writing and the performances in English did pull me out of the experience a little bit. It felt like the writing was quite stilted, it didn't always feel supernaturalistic, and it did affect my immersion into the experience at times. The other thing that affected my immersion was the casting of the voice actor in Richard's role, who I've done some research to try and confirm this, but if it isn't the guy that played Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher 3, boy oh boy does it sound a lot like him.
They concern the work you're doing.
Am I fired? You can't be serious, Frank.
No, not fired. We are just restructuring.
And every time, it took me hours, I should say, to get used to Jerry being Richard. And sometimes that is a problem with casting a well-known voice actor from a big AAA blockbuster. He's a good voice actor. It just sounds at times a bit too much like Jerry. But that's a silly quibble. I definitely enjoyed the overriding themes and state of mind. It feels like the studio behind this has got some great ideas. I love seeing the ideas of transhumanism explored. It's incredibly current to the moment right now with technology as it is, and the technology not just of us moving beyond our human shells, but the technology of us living in virtual worlds. You know, I have experienced a fair bit of VR, and there is something very compelling about that. This is something that is being explored in modern media from everywhere, from video games to books to current blockbuster movies like Ready Player One. Our dependency on virtual experiences to help us get through and ignore the pain of the real world, which would be, in this case, the Berlin set 2049 storyline in State of Mind. People desperate to escape that society. So yeah, I think State of Mind poses some big themes, some big ideas. It doesn't necessarily always execute on the gameplay, which can feel a bit tacked on. This would almost be better as an animated movie or an interactive movie and not try and be sort of this adventure game element. And, you know, I didn't always love the English voice acting and the writing. It feels a bit clunky in places. It could definitely be done with a few more passes by native English speakers. But for the most part, I really enjoyed State of Mind. I think it's a brave project for a small independent studio to take on. I love the ambition of it, and I always respect that from an indie game. So I'm going to give State of Mind a well-deserved 3 out of 5 stars.
BXB. It's in the game.